Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Exploring the Lord of the Rings. This is session number 201. And tonight we are going to begin the process of preparing to leave Rivendell. We're probably not going to be in Rivendell for more than like another month or so at this rate. That departure is imminent. So here we go. But anyway, we'll see. But before I start tonight, some announcements. So of course I have an important announcement this week. Last Wednesday, so it's now this announcement is now almost a week old, but I haven't talked to you guys about it yet, which is that our fall fundraising campaign has launched for the year. Always a fun time in the Signum calendar, our fall fundraising campaign, which launched last Wednesday night when we started our Nature of Middle-earth class for the Mythgard Academy. And it's always a lot of fun. Of course, I always enjoy the fall fundraising campaign, as I love the opportunity to say thank you to all of you wonderful folks who helped to make Signum possible. As I announced last Wednesday night, we set an all-time record last year for fundraising for Signum. We raised over $88,000 for our annual fund, which is just stupendous, like 20,000 more than the year before. It was like a 33% increase over the previous year. It was spectacular. So our target for this year, is 100,000 for the annual fund for this year, and we already are over almost to 57,000 for this year so far. So we're off to a really great start for our annual fund. So I did just, of course, want to ask if you haven't made a donation to Signum this year, and for this fiscal year, which starts in August and goes through next July, that you would consider making a donation. The money that you've been able to give has made a huge impact on Signum. I was sharing on Wednesday night about how we've been able to triple the payroll at Signum University for our our non-faculty staff. It's been a huge time of growth for us at Signum, and the wonderful donation year we had last year really played into that very significantly. So when you give money to Signum, almost all of your money goes to support the work of the wonderful people who make things possible. We pay for very little else other than we pay the fees and taxes and things that we have to pay, and then we pay for a few software licenses and people. That's pretty much what we do. We put as much of it as we can to people, and it's really it's my favorite thing to spend money on. Now, here's the other thing I wanted to tell you before we leave the subject for now, and that is this year for the fall fundraising campaign, we're doing a special drawing. So I do prize drawings every year, but we're doing it differently this year. So here's what's happening. In this fall's fundraising campaign, and I forgot, I've got a slide about that. In this year's fall fundraising campaign, we are celebrating the breadth of our Signum programs. So what I'm doing for the drawing this year is we have 4 programs that are going to be, have some level of tuition. Though, of course, we try to keep our tuition as low as possible in every program. But here's how it's going to work. So for each week of the campaign, I'm going to be drawing the name of one of the people who donated to Signum during the course of that, whose donation was processed during the course of that week. So that means if you have a monthly donation set up, as many people do, then whatever week that falls in, you'll count for that week. I promise everyone who has a monthly donation will be counted towards one of these. Though, of course, if you make an extra donation, you can, double your chances. But anyway, so every week we're going to do a drawing from the list of folks who have donated during the course of that week. And the winner is going to receive a golden ticket, a ticket that you can redeem for either one of our Anytime Audit courses from our graduate, drawn from our graduate program, for a month of our Signum Academy Club's subscription for a grade 3 through 12 person for 1 month of a Signum Path registration for our professional development program to develop personal and communication skills, or for a module in our new SPACE program, which is our Signum Portals for Adult Continuing Education. And for more information about our SPACE program, which will be launching soon in December, you should come to the webathon on the 16th of October, Saturday, October 16th, where I'm going to be explaining more about, I'm going to be doing our State of the University address, where I'll be explaining more about our SPACE program and how that's going to work. It's going to be really cool. So that is that's what's going to be. So that's what's going to be happening. I'm going to be doing the drawing every week during the Mythgard Academy session. So tomorrow night, at the beginning of our Nature of Middle-earth class, I'll do the drawing for the first week. So there's still time to make a donation this week and get in on this first drawing. So there we go. So yeah, Wolfiel, it's not exactly just an excuse for me to say our SPACE program, but it's just it just rolls off the tongue. It really does. It's just pretty awesome. Okay, so that is what is happening. So again, just thanks to everybody who has been so generous in supporting Signum over the years. We have very generous and very faithful donors, and I am very, very grateful to all of you who can do that. Two last really quick items. One is Middlemoot is coming up, our regional moot in the Midwest. That's going to be located in Waterloo, Iowa on the 9th of October. Still time to sign up for that, either for digital attendance or for on-site attendance there in Iowa. Looking forward to that. Mike Drought is going to be speaking at this event, so you can come. We're going to be talking about language and philology and lots of the things that Tolkien loved best. So come join us for that conference out in Waterloo, Iowa, or join us online. We had New England Moot this past Saturday, up here in New Hampshire, and that was great fun, and things worked really, really well. So I am enjoying, philology, the love of words, friend of words is the theme of Middlemoot here. So anyway. Just wanted to make sure that you guys knew about that. And finally, we have a special on one of our Anytime Audits, the language invention course taught by Andrew Higgins several years back. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that, because that promotion is ending on Thursday. So if you wanted to get our our invented languages course, in which Dr. Higgins talks about, of course, Tolkien's Elvish languages, as well as some other fantasy languages, then you can get that. Just go to our Signum University homepage and you should see that. So there we are. Okay, now with all that said, let us jump back into the text here. So we have been discussing where the scouts went and what the scouts found there. And now we have Gandalf's response, the conclusion that Gandalf draws. Now, this is a moment of transition. If you kind of, hang on a second, I need to, let me, where did it go? Oh, hang on. Went too far. Here's where I want to go. The last slide that we did before. Okay, here we go. All right. So remember that, notice the transition that we're doing, because it's an interesting kind of narrative moment. We don't do this sort of thing all that often in the text. That is, we go from the narrator telling us what's been happening, right? In no region had the messengers discovered any sign or tidings, of the Black Riders. No other trace was to be seen, and nowhere was their presence to be felt. It seemed that they had vanished from the north. Okay, but then that goes immediately into Gandalf's dialogue, right? 8 out of the 9 are accounted for at least, said Gandalf. So We're not given any sense of time frame, any sense of location here. We don't know exactly to whom Gandalf is speaking, presumably to Frodo, right? But it's kind of interesting the way that this just segues straight into what Gandalf said to someone at some point. Having this kind of a disjointed piece of dialogue like this is sort of unusual, right? We went from the narrator just kind of telling us about it to apparently the end of an actual conversation at some point in some time, but we're given very little information about that, which is interesting. Again, it's not unknown, but it's a little bit unusual. Drowsnake, that's an interesting observation. It is a little bit like what happens in the Silmarillion sometimes, where we kind of zoom in, though usually there's some kind of narrative transition, right, between like the describing things like a historical, annal, from 10,000 feet to, zooming down in close to the ground and giving dialogue and stuff like that. Yeah, but I agree, Matt. The list of possible listeners is relatively short. Bilbo, Frodo, or Sam are the three possible transcribers of the conversation with Gandalf, and I would suspect that it's Frodo. Captain Mo, we'll get there. That's going to be an interesting question. Remember that question about the. But we'll wait till we get to Holland to talk about that one. But yeah, Drosnik, I doubt that Findegil, King's Rider, is creeping about in the bushes here. Now, we know that he does add things after the fact, but I can't imagine it's this. This seems like a relatively low percentage shot of getting Findegil's intervention here. But Bjorning in Exile was wondering if... did Frodo or Sam need a segue to the time the Fellowship leaves? Yeah, I mean, what we see if we just like peek ahead, right? Where we're going to go after this, we're going to get a narrative frame again, right? Elrond summoned the hobbits to him. And so we don't know how much time has passed in between the conversation that some combination of hobbits apparently was happening with Gandalf until their conversation with Elrond. But here, of course, we know much more clearly who's there, or at least a minimum of who's there, right? Elrond summoned the hobbits, meaning all 5 of them, I presume, based on it just says the hobbits, right? But again, we're not sort of there yet. So it is a kind of, so Gandalf's words in these 2 paragraphs, Bjorning, are a transition between the narrator telling it's the whole like, and time passes and the seasons passed by and the hunter's moon, right, and the star and red star in the south and all that whole passage, right, that to describing the accounts or the journeys and findings or lack of findings of the scouts. This is clearly the end of that passage and not the beginning of the next passage. Because again, we get a clear transition for the beginning of the next passage. Elrond summoned the hobbits to him, right? So, now like the curtain rises on a very clear scene there, right? So this is definitely the end of the previous scene. So the fact that the last bit was given directly into Gandalf's voice, but again, out of context, like it doesn't matter, apparently, what the context of this conversation was. Like, we're not going to worry about what room they were sitting in or, outside or what was the setting. It doesn't matter exactly who was there. It doesn't matter exactly who is sitting on what, with how many of their buttocks or whatever, like the intricate discussion that we had before. None of that stuff apparently matters. Did earlier, doesn't now. What matters now is simply Gandalf is the one who is going to be giving the final word, essentially, the final encapsulation on the scouting reports and what they should do next. Okay, now let's get to Gandalf's actual words. 8 out of the 9 are accounted for at least, said Gandalf. It is rash to be too sure, yet I think that we may hope now that the ring-wraiths were scattered, and have been obliged to return as best they could to their master in Mordor, empty and shapeless. If that is so, it will be some time before they can begin the hunt again. Of course, the enemy has other servants, but they will have to journey all the way to the borders of Rivendell before they can pick up our trail, and if we are careful, that will be hard to find, but we must delay no longer. Okay. Yes, we did hear about the cloaks and dead horses last time. Absolutely. Okay, so, all right, let's go back to that first paragraph first. There are a couple, so a lot of what we see in that first paragraph just follows up on things that we've already discussed, right? The wafting of the ring wraiths, right? The wraiths wafting back to Mordor is something that we talked about last time. But there are a couple phrases there which I think give us a little bit, words or phrases which give us a little bit more data on some of the conclusions we were trying to draw before about the ring wraiths specifically. Number 1, empty. Empty. Shapeless, I was prepared for. Right? Shapeless, I was prepared for. With the whole uncloaked thing that we've been discussing, right? That it's not just that they've lost like their disguise. We talked about this before. They can't just like rob a laundry line somewhere and get, new clothes to give themselves shape to their nothingness. They've been uncloaked, it's not just that they've lost their physical cloaks. It is that they have lost, they were embodied, right? They had been made solid, sufficiently solid to wear cloaks and boots, apparently, but no longer, right? They have been, they're now sent back shapeless. Shapeless, that just kind of adds to the concept that we were previously developing based on what we heard about them being uncloaked. That seems to fit perfectly well what we were concluding before. But the word emptied now, that is really interesting. That does not merely go along with the kinds of conclusions that we were drawing before. Empty really does suggest something different. Well, I'm not sure it's completely different, right? But if they're empty, that suggests that they had been filled previously. We had talked about them having been cloaked. It's not about the literal cloaks, but that they had been given a form, right? That they had been given the ability, essentially, without the cloaking, right, which is done by Sauron, right? Without Sauron exerting his power over them, on their behalf, upon them, however we want to conceive of it. Without that, they would not even really be able to interact with the physical world, right? I mean, forget wearing boots and cloaks. They couldn't ride horses. They couldn't communicate. They couldn't speak to people, right? Because, you've got to be able to interact with the physical world just to make words, right? Especially in the dark, the gaffer might not be able to make out very well what you look like under any circumstances, right? As he's more than a bit blind, the gaffer. But, in order for him to be able to hear the words that you're saying, you need to be able to interact with the air, right? And form words and sounds. So clearly they had something going on. But this idea of emptiness, right? I find it particularly evocative because they had been filled, right? It's the image of being cloaked or uncloaked that we were working with before invited me anyway to kind of picture it as like an encasement, like a concealment almost, right? But yeah, now Almaria, filled with their master's will is what it sounds like, right? That, that idea that Sauron is not just like encasing them or surrounding them or something like that, but that he is filling them, right? That there is this sort of special portion of his power that he places in them in order to empower them, in order to enable them to interact. That, he is the filling. Sauron is the filling. Absolutely. So, Lupita, I agree. It is almost like that sort of cloaking, and I'm using the word cloaking here in the metaphorical, not the literal cloaks, but the metaphorical cloaks that they had before are less of a shell with which he has encased them, and more of a kind of like container in which his spirit is poured. That seems exactly right. So yes, the ring wraiths would be like a particularly evil Twinkie, Valori. That's just it. But yeah, so they have been emptied. Now they are empty and shapeless. And that just seems like a really apt and powerful word with which to characterize what is essentially the true nature of the ring wraiths, right? Left to themselves on their own, this is what they are. They are empty. They are these empty, shapeless, hopeless, enslaved spirits, right? Who still retain, will of their own, like they can, go about and do things, right? They can speak and talk and perform their master's will, but the kind of, nothingness to which they have been relegated through the power of Sauron, through the corruption of their rings, is, I think, really evocatively conveyed by Gandalf in that phrase, empty and shapeless. I agree, Almaria. I don't think they can know joy anymore. Yes, they're thralls, Amathorn, exactly. And Michael, it is a contrast with wights who can still interact on their own. Although remember, empty and shapeless, it's not unlike what happens to the wraith when Tom Bombadil sends it off, right? What seems and I think we can see a kind of parallel here. What seems to have been providing the ring wraith with its cloaking, right? What seemed to be filling, I guess. The evil cream filling in the center of the barrow wight was something connected with its barrow, right? And when the power of the barrow was broken by Tom, and the wraith was separated from it and banished from it out into the darkness, right? Off it went, I believe, empty and shapeless. Except they have no master in Mordor to return to, right? So it's just going to wander out far beyond the darkness. Yes, and I absolutely agree, Lupita. I think that you're right. When the wraiths do waft their way home to Mordor, Sauron is going to overfill their containers beyond the manufacturer's recommended amount. Yes, he's going to fill them back up. He's going to top them off again when they get back home, but he's not just going to put the same quantity or degree of his spirit and will into them. He's gonna buff them up, right? He's gonna give them an extra dollop of evil cream filling that he's gonna fill them up with. They are going to be significantly more powerful next time. Yes, Matt, you're right. This ties, Matt says this ties to the irreducible fact that the physical is tied to the spiritual. One can't exist without the other. Without the vestments of Sauron's will, they are empty and shapeless and presumably powerless. Exactly. And of course, this is the destiny. We've seen it already with the Barrow-wight. We're getting a foretaste of it here with the Ringwraiths. Of course, what we're getting is not a foretaste of their ultimate destiny. Their ultimate destiny is to finally be released from this enslavement, right? When Sauron is taken down and his power is broken. But it's Sauron's ultimate destiny, right? Empty and shapeless. That's going to be him when the ring is destroyed. Ooh, spoiler. And of course, Saruman as well. All of those, we will see a number of see and hear about a number of empty and shapeless spirits. And so this is definitely a trend that we can, discern so far. Yes, you're right, Matt, that Sauron's refilling of the Ringwraiths feels like a perversion of Gandalf's re-embodiment when he's sent back following his fight with the Balrog. I agree. So what emptied them, Hugo? The river, the spiritual boulders. Yes. I mean, so keep in mind that, and this comes back to what Bjorning in Exile was saying before about the connection between the physical and the spiritual, right? They've been given a kind of embodiment. Here's another way to think about it. Matt, I guess I would go one step further back from the refilling of the Nazgul being parallel to the re-embodiment or reincarnation of Gandalf, right after his death. We could go one step further back and say that their embodiment in the first place, right? Like that, when Sauron first corrupts these mortal creatures, and then having corrupted them, what does he have, right? When Sauron looks about him, right, and is trying to, calculate what his assets are, he's like, all right, so I've got these 9 ghosts now, right, whose butter is scraped over so much bread that they can't even, they're still tied to the physical world, but they can't even interact with the physical world. So he's gotta do something in order to embody them. Well, Matt, isn't that interestingly parallel to what happens with Gandalf and the Astari from the beginning, right? Where you've got these spiritual beings who don't have bodies, right? Can interact with the physical world, but don't have bodies, and whom the Valar embody in order for them to come to Middle-earth and interact with folks and take part in the struggle against Sauron. Sauron takes these wraiths who are enslaved to his will, and he sort of embodies them, partially embodies them. It's not a very thorough job, right? He doesn't really give them flesh, like Gandalf has real flesh, like Gandalf has a heart that beats and blood that circulates and eyebrows that grow and that kind of thing. But the Ringwraiths, sadly, have no eyebrows, which, yeah, I think the text doesn't explicitly say that, but I think it's implicit. But yes, exactly, Valori. Gandalf's arm can need a sling. We see that his body is a real legit body, right? So Sauron's embodiment, his cloaking of the Ringwraiths, is it's parallel to, but it's obviously not the same as. Like it's a very pale, imitation of the incarnation of the Astari. That might be a way to think about it, Bjorning. The 9 rings have drawn them so far into the spiritual world that it requires Sauron's will to put them into the physical world. He says, let's see, and when the ties between them and the material world, the cloaks, are broken, they cease to exist in the material world and have to go back for more of Sauron's will. Yeah, something like that. That's more or less the way that I'm thinking about it there. Exactly, Torn Brother. So The imitation is so pale as for them to be nearly invisible. Yeah. All they can do is just interact with physical things, right? To give shape to their nothingness. That's again, what was those Aragorn's? Was that Aragorn or Gandalf's phrase? I'm forgetting now. But exactly. Yes. It will be interesting to watch the Nazgul interact with the material world when we see Nazgul 2.0. Yeah, Hrothgar, totally agree. Totally agree. Great to meet you at New England Moot this weekend, Hrothgar, by the way. Yeah, and you're right. Even their senses are very limited, Lupita. You can absolutely see the way in which the limitations of their interactions with the physical world. Not only are they hard to see, right? And even like to hear, like their voices aren't awesome voices, right? I mean, like they hissing voices and stuff that are hard to understand, right? I mean, it's a voice, but it's not a great voice. But also they can't see very well. And yes, Matt, that's exactly where I was wanting to go next there. All this talk about cloaking and uncloaking, of course, inescapably, and especially with the parallel with the Astari that I was suggesting, makes us think of the passage where we met Gandalf the Grey uncloaked, or rather Gandalf the Grey threatened to uncloak himself, right? Or like partially uncloaked himself to Bilbo there in chapter 1. Which we clearly could see was an exertion of his power, right? He, to quote Gandalf later on, was putting forth all of his power, right? It required almost all of my power. Remember he talks about how much power he had to put forward to help Bilbo in that moment. He was acting, right? He was exerting his will in a sort of a raw form, right? He wasn't just being persuasive or something, right? He was putting forth his power. That speaking of Gandalf the Grey, uncloaked, undisguised, revealed in his power. And you're right, Matt, that we also see it in other places, like we will see Aragorn uncloaked later on in the Fellowship of the Ring as well. So yes. Yeah. But anyway, sorry, back to the one other point that I almost made and then left behind, but I don't want to leave it behind completely. The connection between the physical and the spiritual. There seems to be a real connection, right? It matters when the physical form of an embodied spiritual being is slain, right? Sauron is going to die. He's done this before, right? Sauron's physical form has been destroyed previously, right? That's happened on 2 other occasions, at least, possibly 3. I think he didn't actually die because Luthien let him go in the Silmarillion. So I think he was only mostly dead in the Silmarillion. I mean, when he flees off, I'm pretty sure he still has his physical body there. But he definitely dies when he goes down with the island, right, in Númenor. And he's definitely slain by Isildur and company in the Battle of the Last Alliance. And he still has the power to regain sufficient strength to re-embody himself. But that's why he doesn't just pop back up again immediately. It takes him a long time before he regains sufficient strength to reveal himself again. It takes hundreds of years. It takes hundreds, more than, a couple thousand years before he's really back in business again. Anyway, he's hence the necromancy. Well, necromancy works a little bit differently than that. We talked about necromancy in our Morgoth's Ring discussion last year. There's some fascinating stuff about how necromancy really works, and it's kind of horrifying. But it's not about fueling himself exactly. It's about manipulating other people, basically. Anyway, okay, so But anyway, the point is, when things are killed, it really matters. Like when their bodies are destroyed, it matters. This will matter with matter with Sauron very much, of course. When the ring is destroyed, oops, again spoiler. That'll be even a bigger deal. When Saruman is killed, it matters. It's a big deal. When the Balrog is killed, it's a big deal. When Gandalf is killed, it matters, right? Yeah, the cloaking of the Nazgul does not count as necromancy. No. Necromancy is about interacting with dead spirits. Okay. Here's the 30-second synopsis of necromancy. Some elves, when their bodies die, their spirits are set free. They are invited, not compelled, to go to Valinor and go to the halls of Mandos. If they choose, they can stay. Their spirits can stay and kind of haunt Middle-earth. This is a bad idea, though. And when they do make that choice, they often go bad. And necromancy is manipulating, dominating, and commanding those spirits of dead elves who have made poor life choices. There's the 30-second version of necromancy. But anyway, okay. So, poor afterlife choices, Valori, exactly. And some poor life choices leading up to it, usually. But yeah. Human Fea can't do that too. Human Fea, the Fear of humans have an appointment, right? They go to where the elves know not. They cannot choose to hang about. I don't believe they can choose to hang about, though sometimes their departure can be delayed, as for instance the Oathbreakers. But anyway, no, it's not technically necromancy what Aragorn does at the Stone of Erech, for instance. But more later. Nancy, you're right. Feanor did go to Mandos. So there you go. See, very few people have made poorer life choices than Feanor in life, but there are some who screwed up even more than Feanor after death. So there you are. Okay. Yeah, exactly, JJ. You've got to think, clearly Iluvatar gave the thumbs up to the whole Oathbreaker situation, right? Like however that came about. But anyway, okay. Trying to rein in this chain of digressions, necromancy, uncloaked, Gandalf. Notice, though, something interesting. Notice that there's almost a reversal there, right? The uncloaking of the Nazgul is emptying them out, right? When the Nazgul were uncloaked, they're left empty and shapeless, right? It is like, I don't know, Fourth Dauntless, I think maybe it was you, was kind of saying it's like the power that was in them is just kind of like spilled and runs out into the ground, right? It's gone. Whereas when Gandalf uncloaks himself or partially uncloaks himself in his interaction with Bilbo back in chapter 1, he's not emptying himself, right? He's not losing anything. It's like positive instead of a negative uncloaking, certainly in its effect on others. Like he uncloaks himself in order to give of himself to Bilbo instead of to like lose that which was imposed on him. You see what I mean? Like it's I'm not at all explaining that well, but do you see what I mean about them kind of going in opposite directions there? And I think that is kind of telling, right? Although there's a kind of superficial parallel to this whole cloaking business. Parallel between, as I said, between Gandalf and the Astari in general and the Ringwraiths. You can see perhaps a kind of imitation, right? On Sauron's part. Now I say an imitation on Sauron's part. He got in first, right? He did the Ringwraiths before the Astari came over. So it's not like he's parodying the Astari directly. But of course, the whole business, it's all about that connection between the spirit and the body, between the Thea and the Hroa, to use the Elvish terms that Tolkien develops later on in his career. In other words, it's ultimately all patterned after the creation of the Hroambari, of the incarnates, elves and men, by Iluvatar. This joining together of the physical and the spiritual that happens in each incarnate person. We can see the Valar, presumably with permission, following that pattern in one direction, right, with the Astari. We can see Sauron having a go from the other direction in what is much more of a kind of pragmatic parody, right? Yeah. Anyway, but I'm forgetting totally how to pronounce that. Jacques, I guess. I'll just call you Jacques. I agree. It does seem like many of the great characters keep their power cloaked in their day-to-day interactions. Yes, that kind of holding things in, right? They go around with the volume turned down. That does, and it's what that seems to me, Jacques, to be associated with. It seems to me to be associated with or counter associated with the bad guys are bad guys. Like, what makes them bad guys? The defining element of bad guys is the how you may be a bad guy if, right, you are exerting your power on other people in order to assert your will over them and to dominate them, right? Good guys don't do that, right? I mean, it's kind of the definition of being a good guy or a bad guy in Tolkien's world. And so I think, Jacques, that's why the good guys cloak themselves, right? Why they hold it in, right? Why they are not, why the good guys are always sandbagging, right? Because to do otherwise, to uncloak themselves. That's why, Gandalf is warning Bilbo, I don't want to do this, but, right, this looks like a time for extreme measures, right? Yeah. And yes, absolutely, Son of Saradoc, the deadly sin of pride versus the grace of humility. Yeah, absolutely. That's a very strong correlation with what we see there. Very much. Good. Okay. There were some other words that jumped out at me in that first paragraph. The empty and shapeless were the main ones. We may hope now, Amdir, I believe, right? We have good grounds for believing that the Ringwraiths were scattered and have been obliged. Obliged is an interesting word, right? They have no choice. Have been obliged to return as best they could. It's going to be difficult for them. Wafting across the continent, not trivial. Does that have something to do with crossing all those rivers? We talked about that before. But yes, they have no choice. And this is one of their grounds for hope, right? We can hope that they're scattered and have been obliged to return as best they can. So it's a great time for us to set out, right? Because they are definitely not hanging about. We talked about that, if they've been disembodied, well, they'd make ideal spies now, right? Even if they can't do anything about it, they could totally track them and know just where they were going, except no, they can't, because they've been obliged to return to their master as best they could. Now, Lupita, that's a great question that I was kind of wondering in the back of my mind earlier before. When they're empty, does the power return to Sauron, or is it lost? I got lost. I'm going lost. Now, I don't think that Sauron is very significantly weakened by this. I think that, and this is one of the reasons, perhaps, that he did give them the kind of economy level embodiment, right? I mean, if he had wanted to, presumably, this is me guessing now. Well, not 100% guessing. But there's a conclusion, right? I infer, how about that? I infer that he could have done more. He could have given them more. But he didn't, because it does take something from him to do it. But like, but again, it's like the value pack of it's the economy grade version, because they don't even have physical body. They don't even have faces, right? I mean, it's pretty low level, but he later on, the reason I infer this is that, again, we will see Nazgul 2.0, and I think we'll have reason to think that there's an upgrade the second time, that he's put more of himself into them. I do think that it's a loss. Again, we don't know that for sure, but just based on what we've seen elsewhere, by elsewhere, I mean with Melkor in the Silmarillion, when the bad guys disperse their will and power into other things in order to buff them up, right? In order first to dominate them and then to empower them to do the will to which they've enslaved them, right? This is a pattern. Melkor did it, right? Sauron's now doing it. But we know it weakens them. It weakened Melkor. We know it's going to weaken Sauron too. So I'm pretty sure. So I don't think there's any backsies on that. When they lose it, again, as I think Fourth Dauntless said before, it is like it's spilled out into the ground. It's gone. I feel almost certain of that. So empowering them further, right? Supercharging the Nazgul can be done, but it's risky because he's going to have to take more of his own power to do that. Interesting. Ray says, does Saruman attempt to do that by controlling Theoden? I'm going with yes. I'm going with yes there, that he has to expend some of his power in the same way. Yep. There seems to be some kind of, like, when you do that, as far as we can see, there's definitely some kind of, it's not exactly like the law of conservation of energy, but it's a little bit like it. There's, Tonstoffel, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch when it comes to dominating your minions. So, just remember that. Anyway, Matt says, we're looking back to our conversations about Weathertop when the Witch King is reporting back to Sauron about how he would not believe these hobbits and what they're capable of. That's a good reason for Nazgul 2.0. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for bringing up Weathertop. I was just going to comment on that at length. I'm teasing about that. But yeah, no, you're right. You're right. They need more juice. They need more juice. It's lovely to imagine that even not only have, Gandalf and Glorfindel and Aragorn contributed perhaps to Sauron's decision to supercharge the Ringwraiths next time. I gotta raise the bar here, or else they're not going to be able to accomplish what I want to accomplish. But it seems also possible that Frodo on Weathertop, and maybe even Farmer Maggot and Gaffer Gamgee might have contributed to Sauron's decision to up the ante a little bit. Yes, and you guys are exactly correct that distribution of yourself, that dispersal of your own power and the accompanying weakening of the self is exactly what Sauron does through the instrument of the One Ring. Absolutely. Good. Sarah, what a fascinating question. Doesn't Aragorn's will keep the company together on their way to the Stone of Erech? Is he expending power as well? Well, we'll look at that, right? I don't want to go too deeply into that because we need to sort of see how it's described and see, do some comparison and contrast when we get there. In general, no. Just as I don't think that Gandalf is weakened. It's not like he's permanently weakened by helping Bilbo. Again, it works differently with the good guys and the bad guys. They're not trying to do the same thing. It's different. Yeah, exactly. Aragorn isn't dominating them. But anyway, we'll get there. But it is a really interesting parallel. That's a wonderful place to look at, to see how does it work? Does it work differently? If so, how exactly is it different? Wherein do the differences lie? That's a wonderful question. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, we'll get there, and we'll look at other examples of similar kinds of things, like what we're talking about with Gandalf before. We'll see other Gandalfian instances of Gandalf exerting his power, and so we'll have opportunities even in this very chapter, perhaps, to talk about that. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm done. Next paragraph. If that is so, it will be some time before they can begin the hunt again. Great. So we know it's going to take them a long time to waft as best they can to their master in Mordor. Of course, the enemy has other servants. Of course. Yeah. I mean, obviously, he has other servants. Whom? Who's Gandalf talking about here? Orcs? Among the servants of the enemy are such diverse elements as... So this comes back to what we were talking about last week. Midges. Clearly. Knicker breakers. Yeah. Yeah. So I think we have to be a little cautious here. I think the answer is we don't know. We don't know. It seemed clear last time. Remember when they were saying that there were no servants of the enemy found anywhere? Right? And I think that we can disprove that means spies and folks who have been suborned into even willful and knowing service of the enemy. Bill Ferny being our classic example, right? Really? The lands to the west of Rivendell are completely free of the servants of the enemy? Aragorn knows just where Bill Ferny lives, right? I mean, yeah. So clear. It seems clear that that's not what they mean, right? So who exactly was being referred to by the narrator in the previous passage when saying no servants of the enemy were found? One conclusion we were saying from that is it seems clear that means there are no armies of orcs on the move. Okay. Probably true, right? Probably true. But I wonder if it means other things. If it means other things. When he says, of course, the enemy has other servants, I don't think it just means orcs. I have a kind of suspicion that Gandalf here is referring to, again, he's talking about the ring race, this whole discussion here, in these two, this whole quote from Gandalf, this 2-paragraph quotation from Gandalf is him talking about the ring wraiths. And then segueing from that to saying, of course, the enemy has other servants, I suspect, that are similar to, in some way, to them. I do not believe the Crabine from Dunland count. I don't think so. Yes. Yes, Ardent Crayon, not all of his servants and chattels are wraiths. That means some of them are men. But it is true that Sauron has corrupted men around Middle-earth to his service. But again, that's true locally, and they don't seem to count. Turambar is wondering if Sauron has lesser ring wraiths, like ring wraiths wraithified by the lesser rings of power. Still dangerous, because the lesser rings, Gandalf said, were still dangerous to mortals in his eyes. Possibly, yeah. Ray Burns points out that it was mentioned that Sauron was calling all evil things. Yeah, well, all I say is this. Let's keep our minds open, right? And I would add this. I think, in the Fellowship of the Ring in particular, it is important for us not to think we know all the answers in advance, right? When we hear a phrase like, of course the enemy has other servants, if you find yourself immediately supplying a list, oh yeah, I can give you the whole menu, right? I can give you the whole roster of the enemy servants. And you start ticking off your list of things that you know of from later in the books, right? Careful, because there's a lot of stuff that's still there in the Fellowship of the Ring that Tolkien is still discovering stuff, you know? And there's some wild and crazy things coming up in the Fellowship of the Ring. So let's just... these two statements about the servants of the enemy have been vague, extremely vague. And let's just accept those in their vagueness. And let's be on the lookout and see whom we meet who might qualify as a servant of Sauron. They will have to journey all the way to the borders of Rivendell before they can pick up our trail. What does that tell you? What does that tell us about the servants? We have gotten one piece of information about the servants in question that Gandalf is referring to. Hathalos, yeah, they're far away. They're not local. Yeah, it's not Bill Ferny we're talking about, right? All the way, I presume that means from Mordor. They'll have to journey all the way to the borders of Rivendell. So, like, the Ringwraiths are going to waft back to Mordor, report when they get there, and then the other servants are going to have to set out from Mordor. Doesn't say explicitly from Mordor, but yeah. I don't think we're talking about Bill Ferny here. Now, Jacques, I can agree that Gandalf is perhaps pondering this and unsure of who exactly is or isn't in the enemy's servant, in the enemy's service. Yes, though again, I don't think we're talking about secret double agents here. If we wanted to, I bet you we could find, hey, JJ or anybody who has the e-text, do a quick look, search for the word servant. Because I think this is used about Sauron in other places, like he has other more useful servants, for instance. Or aren't there places where the Ringwraiths are called the most terrible of his servants? Yes, he has many more useful servants. Yeah, exactly. That's the one I was thinking, but he won't forget you again. Even when the Ringwraiths are being sent out, we're told, there you go. That's one of the other passages I was remembering in the back of my head there, JJ. 9 he gave to mortal men, proud and great, and so ensnared them. Long ago they fell under the dominion of the One and became Ringwraiths, shadows under his great shadow, his most terrible servants. Most terrible. So he has other servants of inferior terribleness, right, to the ring wraiths, but still presumably terrible in its own right, in their own right, right? But again, this makes me think we're not talking about Bill Ferny here, right? Good. Excellent. I thought that this would be fruitful. So JJ also gives me, you mean the riders? I feared they were servants of the enemy, says Frodo to Gildor. What are the Black Riders? Is it not enough to know that they are servants of the enemy? Flee them. Speak no words to them. Yes, exactly. So notice how all of those... Oh, good. JJ says, you have frightened me several times tonight, but never in the way that servants of the enemy would, or so I imagine. Now, that's Frodo speaking, JJ. So I would theorize there that Frodo is thinking about spies, people who are in the service of the enemy, but not necessarily, not just double agents. Like Bill Ferny doesn't freak him out in the way that when he talks about being frightened in the way that servants of the enemy would, or so I imagine, I think what he is talking about is something like the really bad, creepy feeling that you get when you're near the Nazgul, right? That if there were some being, right, some evil spirit in Sauron's service, embodying or possessing or what, I mean, like Frodo doesn't know. He's imagining, right, the kind of horrifying things that he might encounter, and he seems to be imagining that kind of things. Yeah. And then there's that one, the chattels and wraiths, and not all of his servants and chattels are wraiths, rather. And there he does, Gandalf does seem to be talking about, that's more inclusive. Not all of his servants and chattels are wraiths. Hang on a second. Let me read the whole passage. Why do the horses endure them? Frodo is asking. Because these horses are born and bred to the service of the Dark Lord in Mordor. Not all of his servants and chattels are wraiths. There are orcs and trolls, there are wargs and werewolves, and there have been and still are many men, warriors and kings that walk alive under the sun, and yet are under his sway, and their number is growing greatly. So, who's which? Which of those are servants and which of those are chattels? Chattels means property, possessions, right? I am not convinced that he's referring to the many men, warriors, and kings as servants. I think those probably count as chattels, given that Gandalf says that they are under his sway, right? Maybe they count as servants. Orcs and trolls, wargs and werewolves. Also, note for future times, wargs and werewolves, right? Those are two different things, according to Gandalf. Let's remember that. Okay. Yeah. And the horses count as chattels as well, right? I don't think he's referring to the horses as the servants here. But exactly, Bard. That's how I read it too. That servants implies a level of consent or at least willing corruption, and chattels implies slaves. Yes, I agree. Now, ironically, Bard, by that definition, the ringwraiths are chattels because they're completely enthralled to him, right? And yet they signed up for this, right? So I think they qualify as servants, and yet he dominates even his servants, right? Yeah, good. Turambar, yes, apparently Sauron still has werewolves. We know that Sauron is into werewolves. Sauron seems to have invented werewolves, as far as we can tell, in the first age. He's the Lord of Werewolves, and his, Tower in Garhoth, Tolin Garhoth, the Tower of the Werewolves, where he hung out before he got taken out by Luthien and Huan. Was Sauron's place. So yeah, he's associated with werewolves in the Silmarillion. Still a thing, apparently, according to Gandalf. Yes, Arden Crayon, you are right that Gandalf will refer to himself as a servant as well. Let's So let's think about this. Well, I mean, let's think about this as we move forward. The word servant will be an interesting one to see. And yes, I apologize to like 20 of you who were making this point earlier. I didn't miss it, but I wanted to finish talking about that and come back around to this. Sam's status as a servant does begin to kind of sound like a bigger deal, right? Yes, in place of the, ring wraiths, Frodo will have Sam. Yes. Okay. Anyway. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, let's, we'll see. We'll see more of this as we move forward. All right. He has other servants. They'll have to journey all the way to the borders of Rivendell before they can pick up our trail. That's optimistic. I think that sentence must logically hinge on his statement that follows. And if we are careful, that will be hard to find. Our trail, that is. That's only true. That is, it's only true that they will have to journey all the way to the borders of Rivendell before they can pick up our trail. That's only true if they don't do anything to reveal their current location later on, right? There are basically three possibilities, right? Three ways in which the servants of the enemy could locate the Fellowship of the Ring when they set out. One is, as Gandalf says, going back to the borders of Rivendell and trying to pick up their trail from there. Like, we know they set out from Rivendell, right? The last place that the ring was definitely in Rivendell. If it set out, which way did it go from there? So optimally, he'll have to send servants all the way to the fringes of Rivendell and start the hunt from there. The second option, and clearly the worst option, is if they do something to reveal themselves later on so that they can just make a beeline to where they were at that point, right? And the third option would be for them to, for him to search not like right around, but to like put a cordon around Rivendell, right? To try to find the trail departing at a wider radius. But that requires covering a whole lot of ground, especially since, and remember, this is what was so important about the scouting and stuff, especially if he has no idea even which direction they've set out, right? So for instance, if Sauron knew for a fact that they were headed east, right, to Lorien or to Gondor or whatever, then all he's got to do is search the passes over the mountains, right? And there's a limited number of those. So if he just has to go and search the paths over the mountains, or like set up ambushes at every single pass across the mountains, already kind of having the Gap of Rohan covered. This Saruman kind of has it. Saruman totally has it covered. Sauron sort of has it covered in that he is partially, but not completely in charge, running Saruman down there. But exactly, JJ, he could set roadblocks all along the county line. Yes, it's possible for him to try to do that. Again, this is why it's so important for them to conceal the direction that they're heading. And it is possible, Kurtzimus, that he would believe that the ring would stay in Rivendell for a while. Yeah. Exactly. Bjorning in Exile is wondering if Gandalf is hoping to draw Sauron out to attack Rivendell while the Fellowship skips through the emptied lands east. I wonder. I don't think he's imagining a march in power right away from Mordor. I don't think that the goal is to try to induce that. I mean, it doesn't happen anyway. Like Sauron doesn't pick up and, bring his own self up there. That was discussed, right? The coming of the enemy in the end, that was discussed. And it sounds like unless that did happen, they could hang tight in Rivendell and defend it against the enemy. But it doesn't sound like Sauron is planning that particular move. However, if he does send if he sends all of his second best servants into Eriador, up to Rivendell, trying to find the direction they went from Rivendell, while the company hightails it south, then that's, hey, the fewer of Sauron's second best servants are, east of the mountains, the better, right? I would think, Aranos, that he'd be waiting for the new Ring Lord to establish power locally. Probably. Yeah, probably. Yes. Now, for Dauntless, you're right that in our discussion during the council, we decided that the good guys had severely underestimated Sauron's current ability to make war. Trying to draw him to attack Rivendell in the north would seem foolish if he's as weak as they supposed. That is, his attack on Rivendell in the north would be foolish if he's as weak as they suppose. Is that what you mean, Fort Dauntless? Yeah, I'm also not at all sure that it's not like he's going to empty Mordor. It's not like all of his armies are in Mordor, even necessarily. Yeah, exactly right. It would be foolish of him if he's still as relatively, I don't think he's super weak, but if he's still as relatively weak as they think he is, if they're still underestimating him, as it seems we have evidence to think that they are, then he would be a fool to do it. But he's not a fool, so any attempt to induce that would be unlikely to succeed. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be. I don't see much evidence to believe that is much in their plans. I don't see much clear evidence to suggest that that's what they're hoping for precisely. Yeah. But yes, if they can at least focus the attempts of his spies on Rivendell, especially since, Aranas, if you think about it, if you think about that map, right? If he's going to head straight to Rivendell, if the second best servants of the enemy are going to hot-foot it all the way to the borders of Rivendell, how are they going to get there? Well, they're unlikely to go through Lorien to get there. They're unlikely, I think, to go through the Gap of Rohan. First of all, that's the longest distance route. So it's going to be slowest to get there that way. And secondly, you've got, again, Saruman, the dubiously reliable servant down there. I think that he's likely to send them north up through the Anduin Valley and across the mountains right close to Rivendell. That would seem like the obvious place for the obvious route for the second best servants of Sauron to take as they are coming up to Rivendell. Probably for one of those top two passes, either the pass by the source of the Gladden River or the high pass up by the Carrick. Especially the high pass up by the Carrick is right next to Rivendell, right? So they would come into Eriador right on the spot where they want to be. And yes, it's all under the eyes of the Eagles, Arna. So the Eagles would be likely to see that, which is why it's important that the Eagles have not seen any servants schlepping up in that direction. And I do suspect that Sauron's forces would have an easier time crossing the mountains up there, Bjarnasonar, because I do not believe the goblins are going to resist them. They're going to be working with the servants of Sauron, especially if he sends someone, even if he's sending like really minor league wraiths, like the lesser ring wraiths or something like that, right? Or whoever his not quite as terrifying as the ring wraiths servants are, right, that he might send on this mission, they will probably be sufficiently terrible to impress the goblins in the Misty Mountains, I would think. Yeah, yeah. Jordan, you seem to have a really high opinion of Grishnak. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I share your esteem for Grishnak here. I think that, well, I think that Grishnak's shoulders needed removing of a swollen head, to be perfectly frank, but we'll get to him later on. Anyway, okay. All right. Yeah. So anyway, that's, of course, pure speculation. We have no idea exactly what route they would take. But again, if we're, the scouts, we're sitting here in Rivendell, it seems a pretty good gamble anyway. So yet another reason to head directly south through Holland, right down to the Redhorn Gate, through Lorien, and that way, because then Lorien covers you when you get there. Right, you're going to vanish off the map as far as Sauron and his servants are concerned. Right when you get over. So yeah, I think that it seems a really good plan for them to avoid the other servants, for them to avoid Saruman. It's excellent. Now, I agree, Kurtzimus, that there is no gamble associated with going through Lorien, but we'll get there soonish. But I agree, Bjorning. A pretty good gamble is Amdir in action. Absolutely. Okay. But we must delay no longer. Turnbar wants to get back to, can we get back to why it's important that the ring wraiths were scattered? Yes. Well, so remember, yes, Bricktails, at least 1 in 10 odds, maybe as good as 1 in 7 for Dauntless. I think any loony would gamble on that. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I made several The Moon is a Harsh Mistress references tonight. We just finished discussing that Heinlein book in our Mythgard Academy class. The scattering of the wraiths does seem important. And notice that's where he started. Yet we may hope now that the ring wraiths were scattered, and they have been obliged to return as best they could. Right. So that's a good thing. But the scattering is step 1. Right. First, have they scattered? I don't know that we can. I don't know. I don't know that I see or understand fully the mechanism of this yet. But we have several pieces of evidence that tell us that the Nazgul are stronger when they are gathered together. Is it because they have all been filled with that, the evil, creamy filling of Sauron's power, and that it like basically, since his power is in each one of them, some of his power is in each one of them, when they are together, it's like, it's all one power. It's like his power is sort of like unified. So it's kind of like Voltron, except with wraiths, right? Maybe not. It's something I don't know that I can explain the metaphysics of it, but we're told that is true, that when they are gathered together, and the Witch King in particular, when he is there with them, and when they are with him, like when they are all 9 together, they they are much stronger. It is a more than simply additive power that they have. There seems to be some kind of geometric rather than purely arithmetic combination of their power when they are together. That's what we're led to believe. Is this connected? Are we being given some indirect insight into how that works with this whole emptiness concept that we've been talking about? Perhaps again, if it does make sort of sense. because it's not their own power, right? This is not just the power of combination, to quote Abraham Van Helsing. This is the power that they can exert is not their own native power. Again, it's not like Gandalf uncloaking himself, right? It's the power that's been put into them by Sauron, the power with which they've been filled. That seems to be able to be combined in this kind of amplified state. So they were scattered. If they weren't scattered, could they have reformed? Would they be in better shape? Is it possible they could still be a threat even in their shapelessness? I don't know, but it seems conceivable. Or perhaps Gandalf here is merely stating the same thing in two different ways, right? We may hope now that they were scattered and have been obliged to return empty and shapeless. Like maybe that's like, again, just two ways of saying the same thing. They're now empty and shapeless, and so they are scattered. Now that they are empty and shapeless, they are scattered because they're empty and shapeless. They can't combine anymore. That seems more likely, really, of the two possibilities. That is, like, they're empty and shapeless, and thank goodness they're also scattered, or else we could still be in trouble. That's one way of reading it, but I think the other way is more likely, that they've been scattered because they were empty and shapeless, not because they all washed up down the river in different places, right? Because it's not about they didn't have physical bodies, right? Their cloaks got ripped off, but that wasn't the problem. Yes. Okay. Exactly, Cook. Not just scattered numerically, but literally their essences have been scattered. I wonder. I mean, I think when he says scattered, it means the 9 of them, right, were scattered from each other. I don't. Right, Chris was wondering the same thing. Maybe each individual was scattered in some sense. It's another way of describing that emptying out, right? Possibly. It's possible that it's both. It's possible that it's both. Nancy says, it sure would be helpful when deciding these things if we had an Istari who had studied the Rings of Power. Yeah. Can't you see how useful it would be to really invest some time studying the arts of the enemy, right? I mean, it'd be so useful to be able to understand this. We could do so much good if only we understood better how the arts of the enemy worked. Is that so much to ask? Right? I think if our intentions are right, if the ends that we're shooting for are sufficiently noble, it might be a good idea. Maybe we should try that out. Next week we could move on to breaking things to find out how it works, Vilori. I totally agree. Absolutely. Great. Well, with these, with these very constructive suggestions, I think we should probably stop. I was contemplating rashly moving on to a second slide, but that's just silly. Though I do agree that Erev Numenor, you're right. We must delay longer. I agree with the comment before that we must delay no longer is clearly the implicit subtitle of this whole program, right? Exactly. We must delay our break of day. Yeah, something like that, JJ. Exactly. All right. We were talking about this a little bit at New England Moot. You know, it's like, how much are we still slow? Are we still slowing down significantly? Like, is that? And we've been on a pretty steady 1 slide per class pace. I think that's been our average now for a little while now. Of course, the slides aren't exactly the same number of words, right? But I think we've hit a groove here. Yeah. Okay, cool. Very good. Okay. So thank you guys for joining us. We will see next week. We will meet with Elrond and we will begin the formation of the Fellowship of the Ring is scheduled to commence next time, and pretty soon it's going to be time actually to depart from Rivendell. So how about that? All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. We're going to shift to our field trip now. We will be back next week. Next week will be our final session prior to Middlemoot. But I will be back from Middlemoot by Tuesday as well, so there shouldn't be any disruption there. And don't forget the nature of Middle Earth, right? We're going to be discussing probably chapters 3 and 4, I'm guessing. Maybe we'll get frisky and get as far as 5 in Nature of Middle Earth tomorrow night, 10 p.m. So that'll be a lot of fun. All right, let us move forward into our field trip here.
All right. I got my book the other day. So happy.
Okay, here we go. All right, we're still
Good evening, everyone.
we're still stable mastering it, aren't we?
Yes, I believe so. That is
I'll be with
correct.
you in a moment. I'm finishing an instance.
Okay. So
All
tell them
right.
about the Twinkies, sir.
Tell them about the Twinkie.
That is probably the most quoted movie in my household.
Yeah, it's a tie between that and like and when I was a kid growing up, it was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade was the other big one.
Ah, I see. Yeah.
Don't come any closer than that.
Yeah. I think apart from obvious and inescapable Tolkien quotations, I think that in my household it's Ghostbusters and Pride and Prejudice get the most quotations
Pride and Prejudice.
on a daily
I agree.
basis. Yeah.
Where we go.
Hrothgar. Oh, it's a very logical pairing. Hrothgar, the number one thing that that Pride and Prejudice and Ghostbusters have in common is my wife. Really, like that's really the link there.
That sounds like a punchline to a joke that missed the setup.
Yeah. Anne of Green Gables is up there, Rowan, for sure. Top 5, I think definitely. But Anat Corfu, yeah.
My brother and I are trying to think about sibling tattoos, and all we can think of are all the movies that we're constantly quoting.
Yeah.
We had Indiana Jones. We have The Goonies.
Yeah, I do think, of course, the Holy Grail and Princess Bride probably round out the top 5 in my household. But
yeah, that's a good. Princess Bride was our hair cutting movie. Every time it was time for Mom to give all 3 of us haircuts, she'd sit us down and she'd put in the Princess Bride because that was exactly how long it took to cut all 3 of us.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. Yeah,
coming along with the soundtrack, it's like.
Right.
Let's see.
Oh, Emily wants to know what's a typical Pride and Prejudice quote. Let's see. And very likely more is one of our favorites.
Horrible.
But of course, I never complain is another one. My own personal favorite is I would by no means suspend any pleasure of yours. I often say that to my wife.
I accuse my husband of do not know how I suffer.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Not respecting my nerves enough.
Exactly.
Next. Yeah.
Yes.
I also like Obstinate Headstrong Girl, which I often keep.
Obstinate Headstrong Girl is a good one. Yeah. Yes. Obstinate Headstrong Girl. I am ashamed of you. We usually will finish that one. Yeah, yeah.
No, this is when I'm ashamed to admit that I'm creating a Sims world that is completely populated with all of the Jane Austen characters.
Hey, that sounds like a fun project. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, no,
Jordan.
it's actually really fun.
Yeah, no, Jordan. We are exclusively quoting the book, and if we do, when we do think of adaptation, it's totally the 95. There's not even any question about
Yes,
that.
although I do like the line, "What excellent boiled potatoes." I think that one's the only one to pass muster.
Oh yes, are the shades of whatever it is to be so polluted? Yep,
Right.
that one is that one has come out before. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's applicable to many other places.
I finally finished Pemberley the other day, and I was very happy to put up shades in Pemberley.
Oh, cool! You put up shades in Pemberley, yeah, nice,
Yes.
nice, yeah, yeah. No, it's funny. We find ourselves quoting Mrs. Bennet and Lady Catherine most often, actually, because they have some of the best quotes. Or Mr. Bennet. Big fan of Mr. Bennet myself.
Fun fact: Cordovan, the community manager, has a cat named after Miss Elizabeth Bennet,
Oh, there you go.
Love that.
and she is a big floof.
I do like the floofs. Chrissy, are you on right now?
I am. I just got to end that crew for and waiting for the stable master to manifest.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's always a fun waiting. All right, yeah, we just got to Drengle, and we're gonna head up soon here. So our project this week, picking up from where we left off last week, is to try to see if we can piece together. We're gonna we're gonna go up the stairs and see if we can explore around here on the outer walls and the upper portions of Gundabad here, and we will see. I want to see if we can try to construct a timeline archaeologically based on what we see, because there are clearly several different layers of occupation here, right?
Yes.
So I mean, like, let's start off by stating the obvious. The obvious facts are we clearly have at least two different layers of dwarvish occupation. There's the original dwarvish architecture, and then there's the repair work, right? So we don't know for sure what else necessarily is associated with the second wave of dwarves, but that there was a second wave of dwarves is demonstrated clearly by the dwarvish scaffolding that's there to repair the old stuff, right?
Yes.
So clearly there were dwarves here on two widely separated occasions. I just wanted to see if I can see any of these hobgoblins that I was missing before.
Get too far ahead of us.
You're a defiler. You're of no use. You're of no interest to
There's
me.
mischief afoot.
Yeah, there are. Okay, so there's obviously two different times, at least two different times, when dwarves were here. There is obviously, there's these goblin camps, which are plainly quite recent, and just as clearly post-date the second layer of dwarvish occupation, right? As we can see the dwarvish scaffolding that has been erected around the old dwarf ruins is decorated with bones, right? So clearly the orcs were here latest. Then into this calculation, right? We then also have the Angmarim castle, right?
Yes.
So we need to fit that into the chronology as well. And possibly, as we've seen, we've speculated before, of course, from our time in Angmar, two different layers of Angmarim presence as well. The old Angmarim, like during the time of the Witch King, back early in the Third Age, and then the later, renovation of all things Angmarim during the late days under the False King, etc., etc.
Yes.
right?
Fishhook days. Yes.
Yeah, fishhook days. Exactly. What is up with this stalker? Is that a cat or a dog? It's a warg?
It's a warg.
Why does it have a lion's tail and mane?
I think it's kind of hyena-ish.
It's very not wolfish for sure.
Don't know what kind of tails hyenas have.
Me neither. What kind of tails do hyenas have? Not much of one, do they? I don't think they have long tails like lions. That was definitely a lion tail that it had.
Yeah. Maybe it's like a werewolf warg.
Like a were-lion?
Werelion.
Maybe.
Werelion.
There, lion, there, castle.
Yes,
Something like
exactly.
that.
Okay. All right, so let's go upstairs here. And let's see what we see up here. Anything that might help us with our dating. Is this a... No, these are defilers. Defilers aren't fun. I want to see how... See, like, there's a lion-tailed and maned dude again.
Yep.
Okay, his mane is pretty scruffy, admittedly. He's got, like, a mane mohawk going on, but
Yeah.
definitely has a lion's tail with a tuft at the end and everything.
Yeah.
Okay. So...
Sauron was trying out a new model.
Right. Which way do you think we should go? Let's go. This is the shorter way. Left is the shorter
I
way,
just
right?
Poisoned.
Yeah, I'm getting poisoned
Oh,
too.
dang. Yeah.
Defilers.
That was more poison than usual. That was quite a lot of poison.
Okay, all right. Bricktails has just posted some hyena pictures. Yeah, hyenas have these bushy tails.
Bushy tails, huh?
Yeah, short bushy tails.
Intriguing.
Okay. All right. So, oh yeah, I suppose I should ask, chronologically, the present day up here is Fourth Age, right? As Nancy was just asking.
Yes.
Is that right?
This is after the. Yes, this is after the new year.
It's after the new
Okay.
year, right?
So
So,
yeah, Fourth Age.
so we're in the Fourth Age, but I mean, only just in the Fourth Age, so it's
Yeah.
right.
It's
not
like,
not
it's
that
like
much time
the
has
80s,
passed.
but the first part of it's still the 70s.
Right. Exactly. So it doesn't really feel like a new decade yet. Okay. Oh, this is it. We're already at a dead end. There's nothing behind the elephant.
Well,
No, I
I
don't
think
think
a
so.
lot of this is going to be in the new pack that's coming out.
Nope.
Nope. Okay, I guess not. Then maybe.
Okay. Oh, hang on. Oh, look, we can still
Right area.
still carry
run
on.
building,
I was just trying to see what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for
Yeah,
here
that's-
is like we've kind of moved up to another level. It's
Yeah.
another century and more wargs. Man, what? Anyway, what I'm looking for is to see if it joins up with the Angmarim castle at all. That's why I wanted to head over this way first.
See you.
But down here, looking at the landscape, by which I mean the architecture and ruins, we're getting all really jumbled ruins, just like we see down on the ground level, right?
Yeah.
These stripy things, but we're closer up to now. Those are meant to be windows in the
No, I thought
walls.
we determined they weren't because we went inside a hollow one.
Well, the diamonds definitely aren't.
Oh, you mean these little sort of these little
Yeah,
hexagons
in
over
the
here?
like marble faces there.
The-
Oh, this troll is totally blocking my vision here. He's so rude.
No, stable faculty, everyone.
Yeah, anyway, yeah, these what are they? Like the hexagonal rows of windows in the face of the walls here.
Yeah, I think those are definitely windows there.
Yeah. Oh, hey. Look at that. You see the little row of little square holes in those walls?
In the
That's really cool.
yeah.
Like you can see where the original scaffolding was when they built the wall.
Oh, is that what it is?
I think so.
Oh.
That's often what it is when you because it's not unusual to be able to see like rows of square holes like that in the outside of walls in like medieval castles and stuff. And normally that's like they had to to support the wooden scaffolding that was used to erect the. What, the little ones? You think the little ones Hollow Grove could be murder holes? I don't think so. Those are too little.
Murder holes meaning like for arrows and archery.
Yeah, or like just where you drop and or shoot things out of. Yeah, I don't know exactly why they didn't go beam ends. Yeah, like a place where either beams went in from the outside or where beams come out from the inside is just what that looks like to me. The little square rows, perfectly even rows, and we can see a second row right below the darker brown up at the top, can't we? I think so. Lined up with the ones down below. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, I dig it. And then you can power wash it later.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I don't think they're not really positioned like murder holes. That normally you want something where you can drop things, not just kind of shove things out and have them ooze down the wall or whatever.
You wouldn't get much air with that.
No, you wouldn't. I mean, you could shoot out of it, but it's too small. You need even an arrow is pretty small, but you need to be able to aim, right? And you've got the thickness of the wall to deal with. You need a bigger spot.
Yeah.
Than that. But anyway, okay. So is this the end of the? No, it's not. We're still kind of going over here.
Oh yeah.
We've got some more. But I think this looks like the end of the road. Yeah, this is definitely the end of the road. Yep, and there's the Angmarim, the top of the Angmarim. No, there's the tower right over there. So yeah, so it was never attached.
No.
Okay, so this is an interesting little data point here, right? The Angmarim Fortress down there on the by the lake, the waterfront Angmarim property down there, was never attached to the walls up here. It was built near, but not right on top of, the walls of Gondaman. Also below, like definitively below, which suggests to me they clearly had no fear. Like there was clearly no, like, I don't know, like antagonism or rivalry. The people who built that fortress down the hill had no fear of anybody coming from this direction, clearly, because
I think this place was uninhabited at the time.
It must have been. I think they don't seem to have used it because they went out of their way to build this whole separate fortress. Like, why do you do that if you have this other perfectly good fortress? Except maybe it wasn't perfectly good. Maybe it wasn't really defensible at the time.
Maybe. I mean, yeah, it does make you wonder why would they go. If there's no one here, why not just move in here unless they thought maybe the repairs were too daunting or something?
Maybe. Yeah, too lazy. Like the people who come in here and see this as a fixer-upper are the dwarves, right? For whom it's a big deal. So, they're like, oh yeah, let us spare no effort or expense to restore Gundabad to its glory of old. But the Angmarim are like, nah, we're just going to build a new castle down here anyway.
They didn't even steal any of the stones.
Nope, they did not. As far as we could tell, at least not the stripy ones. Well, they didn't go with their aesthetic.
That's like walking out on a plank on your hands and knees so you could stay on the couch while getting the remote, like that kind of lazy that isn't actually lazy.
Right. The kind of laziness that requires more effort.
Yes.
Exactly.
Gosh,
Yes.
I'm still not standing up.
Right. It is just like that. It is just like that. But yeah, I mean, look, the beautiful dwarf designs, the snowflakes, the sort of blue inlaid stripes and everything else, just too cheerful. Like it did not work for them, right?
Maybe there was a purity to Durin's touch that they couldn't endure.
Maybe they just like remember how Minas Morgul is not going to be repurposed, right? It's going to be utterly destroyed. Like you don't like rebuild it. They've got to cast it down, right? Maybe this is like the inverse of that from the Angmarim perspective.
If this is where Durin first settled, it's a holy spot. There might be some sort of residual energy. that they
Maybe.
can't handle.
Maybe there was something like that. Maybe this was as close as they were getting to it, right?
Too much owlie in here.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Interesting. Jordan is pointing out the scratch in the snowflake tile there. Looks the same as in the stone beside it. So is the snowflake cap not a metal cap, but actual stone? Yes, I think so. If we look closely at the surface of the snowflake, not in the snowflake itself, though partially there too, but around it, the texture of it does look like, so I do think that that's colored stone, not metal. We do see some, like the like swirly ones that kind of look like faces. Those look like metal plates, but
Yeah. Those look like copper.
exactly. But this does look like stone.
Yeah, you can see the veining in it.
Exactly. Okay. All right. So, oh great, everybody regenerated. That's cool.
Yeah. Hey, more free XP.
Here you go. Okay. Interesting, though, that... Okay, a couple things here. Interesting. Thinking about our theory about dwarf holy places and such, right? The creatures that we see here are all orcs, trolls, wargs, and enslaved elephants, right?
Oh.
Hmm?
Yes, some guys on my tail.
Oh, I see. You're being chased around.
Pursued.
Yeah.
Excellent pursued by a warg.
Right. Exactly. But anyway, we don't see. My point is, we don't see any of the Angmarim themselves, right? All of the Angmarim worshippers, like all the sort of more like spiritual.
We saw some when we went down the hill last week.
Exactly, in their castle, not up here. Is my point.
Yes. Well,
Right.
Near the approach to the castle from here.
Right. Exactly. So, and I guess we have to go through the little. What do they raise this canopy for? I've like made this enclosed entrance. It looks like the
Maybe
tunnel
our
that
housing
the
is something that had to stay dry.
maybe it kind of looks like the tunnel that the home team comes running out of on on game day. You know what I mean? Like it's.
Yep.
Ooh, look at the gates.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
look
got
at that. Yeah, we got
Oh my
that gorgeous
goodness.
marble.
It's so pretty. And
And
rather cheekily visible for a dwarven door.
yeah, well,
Well, culturally, the whole thing about hidden doors was that an innovation over time, as
Might have been.
they realized the world was not a nice place.
The first
right. I mean,
door.
this place is clearly Gundabad of old appears to have been many things. Inconspicuous is not one of them. So, yeah, there seems to be no. I agree, Jordan. Yeah, keyhole shaped is what I was thinking too.
Yes.
It's like this gate is the key to the realm, the key to the mountains, right?
This kind of styling really does make it look like some sort of holy place.
Yeah. Is that the hole in the middle of the top portion there? Is that a balcony? Is that a window?
I think it might be.
I think it is.
Durin could address his people from there really nicely.
Yeah. Kind of looks like, doesn't it? Yeah, I think it's a window. I don't think there's a balcony that sticks out, but yeah. It really does look like a place where you can, in which case, this is an interestingly small court here. Because, I mean, I guess theoretically folks could be standing all the way, like, on the stairs. Oh, no, they still have a good angle.
Yeah.
They can still see
It
backing
might
my
be a
way down.
shuttered window.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, you can see.
He's a very naughty boy.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
you can see. You can see all the way. Yeah, you can see that window perfectly well all the way down. The angle
Yeah.
of the stairs is like just right.
Yeah, it's like Stadium in reverse.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, you can still see it
And if
all the way
some
down
of the
here.
walls
It
are
never.
up and standing, you'd probably get some good acoustics as well.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, from way down here it'd be hard to see, but yeah, I wonder if the if it's got acoustic design as well.
Didn't put it past.
Well, if you look at the actual keyhole shape itself, I mean, it looks like a little bit of a megaphone shape.
Oh, yeah.
A little bit.
Not
Little
much,
bit.
but
Yeah.
there might be enough to make sound
The
go.
bottom
split.
bit kind of ruins the bounce back, but
Well, no, that gets the dwarves right down here by the door.
yeah. Well, of course, we don't know if there was anything put up, like cloth or anything like that, on any of these things that are now long down.
But there's an interesting repeating pattern. It looks like there might be like a shutter on the back of that, and
Yes.
the pattern, like the triangles in various shapes, is like the same as on the left and the right. There's these, I don't know,
Yeah,
these
the-
protrusions, and it's on the side.
Yep.
And it
Yep.
goes up the
Mhm.
up the pillar too on the side.
Hmm.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
like how they specifically got marble. It looks like two sections of the same block of marble that were a thin veneer that mirror each other, so they get this nice mirror image.
Clearly,
Yeah.
chop the same block in half, just like vroom.
Like I said, they probably took a one piece and used different slices.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the way that the symmetrical lines of the marble frame it are really cool.
Yep.
Oh yeah, sorry. Oh, there's a hobgoblin. Where's there a hobgoblin? Over here, in this direction. Okay. Where's the? I've got a captain. Ooh, is that him? Whoa, they're huge. Oh, and he's got really interesting facial hair too.
Hey, that is
Wow.
not what I
Okay, yo,
figured.
back off, dude. I'm trying to have a look at you.
Kill
Those
Lore Master
dudes are
Summon, please.
enormous. Wow. And he's got tusks. And wow.
You need all the heals.
Yeah,
Onion ring.
totally different proportions. Oh, that's really interesting.
Oh, we're all going down right now. Ugh, there we go.
Oh, one hit, man. Well, here's a fine howdy do.
It's fine.
Oh, I
Hmm.
leveled up after I
There
died.
you go. See, look at that. Instead of dying, you leveled up. How about that?
No,
Okay, well,
I
no,
think
that was
On my Rachel.
I'm talented.
really
Oh, I
interesting.
just got a request from Durin.
You got a request from Durin?
Well, it's
Good
probably
for it.
Durin.
Oh, because you leveled up.
Yeah.
Not, I was going to say no relation, but of course it is a relation.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, in a karmic
okay.
sense. Well, help.
All right. So, one of the things that I'm finding quite curious. Okay, so hang on. So, JJ, I was expecting hobgoblins to be bigger, just from the context in which the word is only used once in all of Tolkien's corpus that I remember. Hobgoblin, that is, and that's in The Hobbit when when Bilbo asks Gandalf why they can't go around Mirkwood, and he says that the area up to the north of, like, if they tried to go around Mirkwood to the north, they would get up near Gundabad, and that would, and that area up there was stiff with goblins, hobgoblins, and orcs of the worst description. It's one of the two places, I think, in The Hobbit where the word orc is used as well, and I think the only place. There you go. Yeah, it's just the passage I was quoting. And I don't think, you can double check this, but I don't remember Tolkien using the word hobgoblin anywhere else. And so when he does use it there, it does sound like he's talking about different sort of varieties of orcs. But I wouldn't have expected them to be so much larger than orcs. I mean, orcs, the great orcs of the mountains, right, are clearly presented in The Hobbit as if they are the apex predator of the goblinoid world there. But I was nevertheless kind of expecting them to be
Small.
the hobgoblins. I mean, a little bit bigger. Oh yeah, there's
Yeah, I mean, the hobgoblins, you think of things like, Puck or that Gremlins rip-off movie.
right.
Little things.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, so what I'm wanting to do here, I want to get a view outwards, if I can, without plummeting to my death.
Oh, beautiful view up here.
Yeah, it is. I'm trying to. This doesn't look like it was designed as a walkway, as a promenade, but we built this, little sticky out business here. So there seems to be some. So let's see here if we can, looking out from here. Let's first imagine what Durin would have seen. He would not have seen Angmarim Fortress over there.
No.
Okay, wouldn't have seen the Angmarim Fortress.
Lots of wells untasted.
Right. Lots of untasted wells, you think?
Yeah, well, lots of water sources at the very least.
Right. Yeah. So you think that this lake here was was at one point a yet untasted well, perhaps?
Possible. These all look like glacier kind of rivers.
It does. Yeah, it looks like glacial runoff. You're right. Yeah, this does look like Mirror 1.0, Hrothgar. I agree. You can see why.
Yeah, you can see why he was attracted to the mirror. It does look a lot like that.
Exactly. It was kind of like home and yet an upgrade. Okay, so. All right, I have a couple questions. This is inspiring a couple questions here. Question 1. The dwarf ruins, which from here are so clear to be seen, right? Here's the one that's highest, the high point straight across from us, right, is part of that original block way out near the cliffs that we were looking at before and visiting before. The place that looked like the the welcome spot, right?
Yeah, the visitor center.
The visitor center. Yeah. It also is from here. The sight line is so clear from here to those fortresses down there. It might possibly help to explain why those buildings are built up above ground. Because I mean, it'd be really easy communication. I'm not thinking beacons, but I mean,
it would work with beacons.
yeah, no, but you could like flashlights or all kinds of ways that you could communicate with this kind of a direct sight line.
Oh yeah.
So I wonder, if they, if that's one of the reasons that, because you're looking out and you see those. Now I wonder when exactly those were built.
Those are the Blackstone edifices.
Yeah, I'm wondering when those were built. Now, Bart, I agree. It is interesting that nothing is built on that island mountain in the middle of the lake. It almost suggests that perhaps there's it's an untouchable spot. I mean, it doesn't look particularly convenient for one thing, but yeah, if it's some kind of holy island, like Tall Brandir, of which it somewhat reminds me, right?
Or it could be new. It could have been like a chunk of the mountain that fell off for some reason.
It's
or even
possible.
an asteroid that came down later.
It's possible.
I'd have to get a good look at it. Kind of want to see what's on there now.
Right.
But we're guessing cursed. Or holy.
JD is wondering, is that a Carrack? Well, we know that Bjorn calls things like that Carracks. Yeah, I think Bjorn would call it a Carrack.
Yeah.
Presumably. I mean, it's in a lake, not a river, but...
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
That island.
Okay.
I'm
So-
looking at things.
There's a bat cave quest on the island?
A bat
well-
cave?
That would seem to... So the bat cave is there?
Yeah.
Wow.
Holy
Maybe it
cursed
is a
island.
holy island.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not the cool kind of bat cave. I see. Okay.
The bat who's hanging from who's offering the quest back into that Khufu? I haven't done the
Oh,
quest
that
yet
bat.
myself.
That bat?
That's what I'm asking because I haven't done the quest
Oh.
yet.
Is if it's like an emissary of the bats of the native bats of that island? Yes,
There you go.
Holodro says that bat. Okay, I see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I guess if the bat actually gives the quest, then it's not a dwarf giving the quest, and so therefore, I was wondering if dwarves were giving like some lame-o quest, like drive out the bats from the island or whatever. Okay,
They
All
have
right.
more pressing problems
yeah,
out here. Like those big old bloody hobgoblins.
right, yeah. It involves rescuing baby bats. Okay, that's adorable. Okay. I approve. I approve of this quest. Okay. All right, so I haven't solved anything yet, but we saw hobgoblins, and that was good. One of the things I'm trying to figure. Okay. Tune in next time when we ask the question, can we see stages in development of Gundabad itself? And how does that impact our assessment of how much has been rebuilt by the modern dwarves? And what do we think this might possibly tell us about when the Angmarim showed up?
Yeah. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Exactly.
Oh God.
I had to.
Exactly. So next week.
Millennials and Gen Xers explain this one to Gen Z. Sorry.
There we go. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so I think we still have a little bit more data to gather. Can we get in through the gate? By the way, I never tried it. Can you get inside, or is
No.
that's only
Okay.
just for the extension? We can get inside. Okay, I saw the announcement of the extension, but
The expansion, good times.
okay,
We'll talk
All right.
about it after the show.
cool,
Oh, yeah.
awesome. All right, so very good. So yes, relative dating of different parts of Gundabad compared with those dwarf ruins, and then also the Angmarim and the orcs and all that kind of thing. So we'll see if we can sort those things out and come up with a timeline after a little bit more exploration next time, and then maybe we will attempt to move on to, because if we can't get in, then I think the next thing, unless we want to go over and explore this wing, which I think we probably do, then we'll be headed up towards Wormsgraf, right? Next time? Or, eventually?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Excellent. All right. Very good. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And I will see you guys next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.